My mother-in-law put something in my drink on my wedding day to liven up the party, but the paramedics were horrified. Although, to be fair, my mother-in-law was too, especially after my husband made a decision no one expected. I am Adelina. I am 27 years old, and a week ago I married my charming husband, Leandro, 32 years old. But our story did not begin with paramedics or unexpected decisions. It started 2 years ago in a quiet coffee shop in the city. The cafeteria was one of those cozy places that feels like a refuge. Its aroma of freshly ground coffee and warm wood tones were an essential part of my morning routine. I needed my daily dose of caffeine to deal with the chaos of work. And this morning was no different. I was deep in thought, focused on my next latte, when I noticed someone behind me in line. A tall man with warm eyes and a friendly smile. But honestly, I barely paid attention to it. My world revolved exclusively around that cup of coffee that I didn't yet have in my hands. However, fate had other plans. Later that week, our paths crossed again. This time, our drinks took a little longer to prepare, and that unexpected delay led to a casual conversation. What started as small talk about the weather and ambient music soon turned into an unexpected connection. We talked about books, our childhood experiences, and even how much we both appreciated that quiet corner of the city. It was a conversation that made me smile in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. Leandro had something special. There was an authenticity about him that completely disarmed me. We exchanged numbers, and that same night, I received a message from him that said, "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" I was surprised, but I accepted. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant hidden on a side street. It was a lovely place, with dim lights and an intimate atmosphere. Although the food was delicious, what really won me over was our conversation. We talked for hours, sharing confessions and laughter. We discovered that we both had a secret passion for karaoke, although neither of us was particularly good, and a mutual devotion for tacos. In the weeks that followed, our dates became more frequent and adventure-filled. Hikes along hidden trails, afternoons exploring museums, and even a disastrous pottery class that ended with us covered in mud and laughing out loud. The more time I spent with Leandro, the more I realized how special he was. Not only was he funny and smart, but he also had a unique ability to make me feel completely comfortable being myself. With him, everything seemed easier. 2 years after that first meeting, Leandro surprised me with a proposal that I will never forget. We had planned a getaway to a cabin in the mountains, a place surrounded by snow and silence. We were huddled by the fire, with the crackling of the wood filling the air, when suddenly, Leandro pulled out a ring. His eyes shone with an emotion that left me speechless. I barely remember the exact words he said, but I knew in that moment that my answer would be a resounding yes. From then on, everything was a whirlwind of emotions. I began planning our wedding with enthusiasm, imagining every detail of that special day. But then I met his mother, Estrella, and things began to get complicated. Estrella was a 57-year-old woman, elegant and with a smile that radiated warmth. It was evident that he adored Leandro, his only son. From the beginning, she welcomed me with open arms, assuring me how excited she was to have a daughter-in-law. She even told me that she had always wanted more children, and that to her, I was like an extension of her family. For a moment, I thought our relationship would be close and harmonious. However, that first impression did not last long. Estrella came to stay with us for a weekend to help us with the wedding preparations. At first, I was thrilled to have her around, thinking it would be an opportunity to connect more. But soon, his attitude began to change in subtle, yet hard-to-ignore ways. The first sign came during breakfast. She had made pancakes, one of my favorites, and as Leandro enjoyed his coffee on the patio, Estrella commented with a smile, "Oh, I guess you don't worry too much about carbs, do you?" Although he said it with a seemingly casual tone, his words left me uncomfortable. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't help but feel judged. Later that day, as we were flipping through wedding dress magazines, she pointed to a photo of a model in an elegant dress and said, "This design is beautiful, but it requires a very specific figure. Not everyone can wear it." Nah, He looked at me out of the corner of his eye as he said it, and although he didn't say it directly, I felt like he was implying something about me. For the rest of the weekend, comments like these continued to appear, always wrapped in smiles and superficial kindness. Despite everything, I tried to stay calm. I didn't want anything to ruin the lead up to our special day. But an unsettling feeling began to grow in me, a kind of warning that Estrella wasn't as excited about our union as she claimed to be. And although he didn't know it at the time, the worst was yet to come. I tried to smile and play it off, but inside I couldn't help but feel insecure. The comments kept coming, one after another, like little needles piercing my confidence. Estrella seemed to have a special talent for choosing the perfect moment and the right tone so that her words felt like a hit, but without losing her kind smile. While we were shopping for wedding decorations, Estrella casually dropped, "You know, a friend's daughter lost weight before her wedding. It looked impressive. Have you thought about doing something like that?" I froze, not knowing how to respond. I mumbled something about being happy with my body the way it is, but the truth is that his comment left me with a bitter taste. I felt like he was judging me, as if not meeting his physical expectations was an unforgivable failure. The situation did not improve the next day. Estrella was going through my kitchen cabinets when she commented with a smile, "Oh, you have a lot of snacks in here. I try to keep my house a little healthier. You don't want to gain weight before the wedding, do you?" I stared at her, trying to process that once again she was talking about my weight. Each word was like a small blow to my self-esteem, and the worst of all was that she said it in a kind tone, as if she was really worried about me. But I knew that wasn't the case. The strangest thing was that he never made these comments in front of Leandro. With him around, Estrella was pure sweetness and friendliness, but the moment he left the room or became distracted, her attitude changed. I felt trapped in a cruel game. One moment, I was welcomed and loved, and the next I was criticized and judged. At first, I decided not to say anything to Leandro. He didn't want to cause conflict with his mother, especially since we were in the middle of such a happy time. I told myself I could handle it, that it was just a minor annoyance. Additionally, I have always been a curvy woman and have worked hard to accept and love my body just the way it is. Estrella's comments were hurtful, yes, but I wasn't going to let them affect my confidence. Or so I thought. The problem was that Estrella started coming to our house more and more often. I felt like I was there every weekend, and even though he said he was coming to help, his constant suggestions and observations made me feel like I couldn't handle anything on my own. I was exhausted. I worked Monday through Friday, and weekends were my only time to plan the wedding and have some peace of mind. But every time I tried to concentrate, there was Estrella, hovering, observing, and of course, commenting. One weekend, I finally had enough. When he called me to let me know he was coming again, I felt a knot in my stomach. I needed time to myself, so I told him I would be busy and not home. His reaction was immediate. "What are you doing?" Without thinking too much, I replied that I was going to see wedding dresses. I guess I just wanted him to understand that I had important things to do. To my surprise, he got very excited. "Oh, I would love to go with you," he told me enthusiastically. Inside, I wanted to scream, but I didn't know how to refuse without sounding rude, so I reluctantly agreed. The next morning, she was at my door with her signature smile, ready to help me find the perfect dress. I tried to smile back, but inside I only felt anxiety. We visited several bridal shops that day. From the moment we walked in, Estrella took over. I would point out dresses I didn't like and make comments about how certain styles wouldn't flatter my figure. I tried to stay calm, but it was exhausting. I couldn't try on a dress without her analyzing every detail. When I finally found one I loved, she commented, "It's cute, but don't you think it's a little tight around the waist? Maybe something more fluid would suit you better." Your comment left me devastated. I loved that dress, but her words planted doubts in my mind. At the end of the day, I hadn't found a dress, and I was feeling completely discouraged. When Estrella returned home, I finally had some peace, but that tranquility did not last long. Over the next few days, she bombarded me with messages asking when I planned to look for dresses again. I tried to dodge her questions, saying I still wasn't sure when I would have time. I planned to keep my plans a secret this time. However, my plans failed. Leandro, without knowing anything about what was happening, casually mentioned to his mother that he planned to accompany me to look for dresses the next day. That same night, Estrella called me with her usual sweet tone. "What time will I stop by your house tomorrow to accompany you?" My heart sank. Again, had to make a decision, and quickly. The idea of Estrella coming with me to the bridal shop was a nightmare. I had already endured too many comments about my body. I knew that if I took her, I would ruin the day with more judgments and criticisms disguised as suggestions. So, in a moment of desperation, I made up an excuse. I told her that the bridal shop had a strict rule and that I could only bring 2 people with me, my mom and my bridesmaid. As soon as I said it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. Estrella was quick to point it out. "What kind of store only allows 2 people? That doesn't make sense," he said, his tone slightly incredulous but completely calm. I felt my face heat up and started babbling. "Yeah, well, it's weird, but that's what they told me." My voice shook as I tried to sound convincing, but couldn't. Before he could ask any more questions, I quickly said that I had to go and hung up the call. The initial relief of having escaped that conversation was quickly replaced by a huge wave of guilt. He hated lying, especially to Leandro's mother, but he couldn't stand another day full of her comments. I decided to focus on the positive. Today would be an exciting day, a day to find the dress of my dreams. My mom and my bridesmaid picked me up, and together we headed to the bridal shop. As the car moved forward, I tried to shake off the guilty thoughts and focus on enjoying the experience. It was a right decision. In no time, I found the perfect dress. It was everything I had imagined and more. I felt a mix of excitement and relief when I saw it in the mirror. It was mine. With the dress chosen, things seemed to calm down. Estrella didn't call me, send me messages, or show up at our house. Although he continued talking to Leandro, which was a relief, there was something strange about his absence. I felt like the calm was too good to be true. I sent her a photo wearing the dress, hoping to share my happiness with her. His response was a simple thumbs up emoji. Nothing else. I wasn't sure how to interpret it, but I decided not to obs. The weeks flew by, and my wedding day came sooner than I expected. From the moment I woke up, I was full of excitement and nerves. Every detail was in its place. The flowers, the music, the decoration. Everything had been meticulously planned, and now all that was left was to enjoy. The ceremony was a dream. She couldn't stop smiling as she walked towards Leandro, her face lighting up with a mix of excitement and love. Seeing her reaction to the dress, I felt like all the stress and complications were worth it. After the vows and rings, the reception began. It was a magical event. The food was delicious, the music upbeat, and our guests seemed to have a wonderful time. The most special moment was our first dance. Leandro and I had taken some classes, and we managed not to step on each other's toes, which was already a victory. It felt like a fairy tale. Everything seemed to be going perfect, until I decided to have something. I approached the bar to order a refreshing drink, and there was Estrella with her characteristic wide smile. "It looks like you're having a wonderful time," he said enthusiastically. "Let me get you something. Relax and enjoy." His friendly attitude threw me off. Was he trying to compensate for previous tensions? I decided not to think too much about it and accepted the gesture. He handed me a Shirley Temple, a mocktail he had once mentioned I liked. Grateful, I took a sip. A few minutes later, I started to feel strange. At first, I thought I was tired, but the feeling grew. My legs felt heavy, and before I could process it, I passed out. Everything turned black. When I regained consciousness, I saw Leandro leaning over me, his face pale with worry. I could hear the sound of sirens in the distance and the confusion of voices around me. The paramedics arrived quickly, helped me sit up, and started asking questions. "What did you eat? What did you drink?" I told them about the food at the reception and mentioned the Shirley Temple that Estrella had given me. Their faces tightened, and they continued to ask if he had taken anything unusual or if he was on medication. That's when Estrella stepped forward, looking visibly uncomfortable. Well, I may have put some alcohol in your drink, he confessed with a tight smile. I thought it would help relax her. I was stunned. How could he think it was a good idea to add alcohol without telling me? I knew I barely drank because my body didn't tolerate it well. The paramedics exchanged glances before continuing their assessments. I felt a mixture of anger, disbelief, and sadness. What was Estrella thinking? Was it another attempt at control? A comment about how I should relax at my own wedding? As they took me for examination, I couldn't help but wonder if this act was an innocent mistake or something more intentional. Things became more complicated than I ever imagined. While the paramedics treated me, they explained that mixing alcohol with certain medications can be extremely dangerous and that I was lucky that the consequences were not more serious. Still, the experience left a mark. When the paramedics left, Leandro turned to his mother. His voice trembled with suppressed rage, and his face, normally so serene, reflected a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Go away," he said firmly. Estrella looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe her son would talk to her like that. She tried to justify herself, saying that she had had no bad intentions, that it was just a misunderstanding, but Leandro did not want to listen to her. With his jaw clenched and his eyes filled with a sadness he had never seen before, he ordered her to leave the reception. The atmosphere suddenly changed. What should have been the happiest day of our lives turned into chaos. The guests, uncomfortable with the scene, began to leave in silence as if the magic of the event had faded. I tried to smile and reassure them, but inside, I felt completely devastated. In a matter of minutes, what we had planned with so much love and care had fallen apart. When the last person left, Leandro and I returned to our hotel room. The journey was silent, heavy. A mixture of sadness and exhaustion hung in the air. Upon arrival, I collapsed on the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. I had dreamed of this day since I was a child, with happiness, laughter, celebration. But now there was only a void. How could he do something like that? I murmured, more to myself than to Leandro. He was sitting by the window, looking out into the darkness outside. He didn't answer. His silence was deafening, and I understood that he was struggling with his own pain. Leandro adored his mother, but what had happened that night had left a deep mark on him. The attempt to recover normality. In the following days, Estrella tried to contact us repeatedly. His messages and calls were constant, but neither Leandro nor I responded. We needed space, time to heal, and to decide how to face what would come next. I was caught in a tangle of emotions, anger, sadness, and a constant pang of disappointment. How had everything gotten so far? When we finally returned home, I tried to focus on our new life together. Leandro and I were husband and wife, and that had to be enough to overcome any obstacle. But every time I thought about our wedding, I felt a pang in my chest. I replayed the events in my mind over and over, wondering what I could have done differently. What if I hadn't had that drink? What if he had set a clearer boundary with Estrella from the beginning? Luckily, our honeymoon arrived just in time. It was a balm for the soul. For 2 weeks, Leandro and I immersed ourselves in new adventures, explored unknown places, and created beautiful memories. In those days, we managed to reconnect, leaving behind the chaos that had followed us. But like all escapades, this one also came to an end, and with it, reality struck again. When we got home, we didn't expect to find Estrella waiting for us at the door. The knot of anxiety in my stomach returned immediately. Estrella, as always, had a tight smile, but this time her eyes betrayed a mixture of stubbornness and feigned regret. Before I could say a word, he began to speak. "We need to talk," he said, crossing his arms. "This cannot continue like this. I just tried to lighten the atmosphere. I didn't mean to hurt you." His tone left me speechless. There was no real apology, just justifications. His words echoed like empty excuses, minimizing the pain he had caused. "I didn't think it would affect you that much," he continued. "It was just a joke." I don't understand why they're making it so big. I couldn't contain myself anymore. It wasn't a joke, Star, I said, my voice shaking with indignation. Your prank put my health in danger and ruined our wedding. Do you really not see it? Leandro intervened before he could say anything else. Mom, this can't go on like this. You need to understand that you crossed the line, he said, with a firmness he had never used with her before. What you did hurt us both. And if you can't acknowledge it, I don't know how to move on. Estrella tried to interrupt, but he didn't stop. From now on, things will be different. There will be no surprise visits, no constant messages. We'll see each other at family parties and important events, but nothing more. I can't allow you to continue interfering in our lives. Estrella seemed bewildered, her eyes filled with tears, but Leandro did not give in. It's not about getting you away from me, he continued. It's about respecting our relationship, about respecting Adelina. If you can't do it, then things will have to stay that way. Finally, Estrella left. Her tears were behind her, but so was a sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like Leandro and I had control over our lives. He didn't know what the future would hold with Estrella, but at least now there were clear boundaries. I could see how much it hurt Leandro to set boundaries with his own mother, but his commitment to me was unbreakable. He wanted to make sure I felt respected and safe, and that filled me with gratitude. However, I couldn't ignore the sadness in his eyes whenever he talked about Estrella. It was clear that the conflict was tearing him up inside, but he was determined to protect our relationship. Yesterday, while I was in the office reviewing documents, my phone started ringing. I looked at the screen, and to my surprise, it was Estrella. We hadn't spoken since the wedding, and I didn't expect him to communicate, much less during work hours. I responded cautiously, and the first thing he told me was that he was outside my office and wanted to see me. My heart raced. The thought that she might come in and cause a scene worried me greatly, so I decided to go find her outside. I invited her to sit at a small cafe across the street. When I saw her, I noticed that she looked upset. Her face was tired, and her eyes were slightly red. We sat down, and before I could say anything, she burst into tears. The situation instantly became awkward. The nearby tables began to pay attention to us, and I just wanted the earth to swallow me. Between sobs, Estrella began to speak. I can't believe what Leandro is doing to me. He doesn't answer my calls or my messages. He's ignoring me, like I don't exist. His voice trembled, and although what he said made me feel a certain compassion, I couldn't forget the reason why we had reached this point. Please, he continued, talk to him. Tell him I miss him, that I just want things to go back to the way they were before. His plea left me speechless for a moment. Up until that point, Estrella had yet to sincerely apologize to me for what happened at our wedding. It was as if he lived in complete denial, unable to acknowledge the damage he had caused. I took a deep breath and looked into her eyes. Estrella, I said firmly, but trying to remain calm, it's not just about what Leandro is doing. This started because of your actions. You ruined the most important day of our lives, and you haven't even accepted responsibility. You can't expect everything to go back to the way it was before without facing the consequences of what you did. She tried to justify herself once more. I didn't mean to cause harm. If I had known what was going to happen, I would never have done something like that. I'm sorry you reacted that way. His words left me cold. It was evident that he still did not understand the impact of his decisions. She was trapped in her own perspective, downplaying everything as if it were a simple misunderstanding. As she spoke, tears continued to stream down her face. The people in the cafe were now looking at us with concern, and I felt increasingly uncomfortable. He wanted to escape from there, but he also knew that this conversation was inevitable. Finally, I told him, "Look, I don't promise you anything. I will talk to Leandro when I think it is necessary, but you need to understand that this is not just about him. You hurt me too." When I returned to the office, I couldn't concentrate. The conversation with Estrella kept spinning around in my head. Should I talk to Leandro about this? Should I try to be the bridge for them to reconcile? My mother, with her always practical wisdom, had told me that I should forgive Estrella and let him go. But it was easier said than done. How could he forgive someone who hadn't even shown true repentance? That night, Leandro noticed my silence and asked me if everything was okay. I considered telling him about the meeting with his mother, but ultimately decided against it. I wasn't ready to broach the topic yet. I felt trapped between my desire to protect Leandro's relationship with his mother and my need to heal and feel respected. Should I prioritize family peace or my own emotional well-being? As I sat alone in the living room that night, I thought about what I would do. On the one hand, he felt that keeping this distance from Estrella would only perpetuate the conflict. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore how much his lack of empathy had hurt me. Should I try to forgive her, even if she didn't deserve it? Or would it be better to keep clear boundaries and protect myself? I would appreciate any advice because I honestly don't know what the next step is. Thank you all for your advice and support. It really means a lot to me to have this space to share what I am experiencing. The situation with Estrella was starting to wear on me. His constant messages and calls had me on the verge of emotional exhaustion, so I decided it was time to sit down with Leandro to talk about how to handle things and find a way to move forward. I explained to Leandro that Estrella had come to my office and that she had apologized to me. I admit I went a little overboard when describing his apology, as it wasn't exactly what I needed to hear, but I felt it was time to try to heal this relationship, at least in part. I told Leandro that I decided to forgive her, and although that was mostly true, deep down I still had reservations. I just wanted to put this mess behind us and focus on our future together. Leandro listened to me carefully and looked at me with concern. "Are you sure?" he asked, with that mix of empathy and caution that characterizes him. I assured her that it was, but that it was essential to establish clear boundaries with her mother to avoid further conflict in the future. Their relief was palpable, but we both knew this was just an initial step on a much longer road. After our conversation, Leandro sent Estrella a message to let her know that we were willing to try to move forward. We thanked him for his apology and explained that we were ready to start again, but made it clear that our conditions still stood. No more surprise visits, no more constant calls, and above all, respect for our privacy. Estrella responded almost immediately, promising that she would respect our boundaries and just wanted to be a part of our lives. Although I felt a little calmer after this, I was also left with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was glad that Estrella seemed willing to respect our needs. On the other hand, I couldn't help but think that a single false step could unleash the whole drama again. I'm trying to focus on the positive and remind myself that even if progress is slow, we're still moving forward. Just when I thought things were taking a more stable turn, something completely unexpected happened. Last weekend, Leandro received a call from Estrella inviting us to dinner at her house. "I think it's important for us to have this dinner to start to normalize things," he said. When Leandro told me, I hesitated for a moment. Was it really a good idea? But after some reflection, I decided that maybe this was his way of trying to make things right. I accepted, and Leandro confirmed our attendance. Dinner started well. Estrella greeted us with warm smiles, and the food she prepared was delicious. During dinner, she tried to remain light and friendly, avoiding any sensitive topics, which I appreciated. Everything seemed to be going surprisingly well, but as always, Estrella had a surprise up her sleeve. After the meal, he left the table and returned with a check in his hand. He extended it toward me, saying, "I want you to accept this. I know I can't change what happened at your wedding, but I want to make it up to you somehow." I looked at the check, and my heart stopped for a moment. $5,000. I was speechless. Discomfort took over me immediately. I rejected the check almost instinctively, telling him that I didn't need compensation and that the most important thing for me was to leave the past behind me. Leandro, for his part, also tried to reason with her. "Mom, it's not about money," he said calmly. "What we want is peace and respect." But Estrella didn't want to listen. He insisted, saying he wouldn't rest until we accepted the check. Before I could stop her, she forced it into my coat pocket. I felt trapped, like I was accepting something I didn't want or need. When we finally said goodbye and left his house, my mind was filled with questions and confusion. On the way back home, Leandro and I talked about what happened. We both agreed that Estrella's gesture was strange. "Why would you give us so much money?" Leandro asked, more to himself than to me. "Is she really sorry, or is she trying to buy our forgiveness?" I couldn't help but feel uneasy. While I wanted to believe his intentions were sincere, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something didn't add up. Was this a genuine attempt to repair the damage, or simply a way to minimize it and move on without addressing the underlying problem? Leandro and I still don't know what to do. On the one hand, we don't want to hurt Estrella's feelings or reject her efforts to fix things. But on the other hand, we don't want to feel that our relationship with her depends on accepting such a disproportionate gesture. It's not about the money. It's about finding an authentic solution based on mutual respect, not grandiose gestures. If anyone has been through a similar situation, we would appreciate any advice. We want to handle this fairly, but also protect the peace we have worked so hard to build. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and things have been quiet. Estrella's check is still tucked away in the drawer, untouched, a tangible reminder of everything we've been through. Every time I see it, I feel a whirlwind of emotions, gratitude, discomfort, and that slight feeling of doubt that doesn't seem to go away. Leandro and I have avoided talking about it because, honestly, neither of us knows what the right decision is. As for our relationship with Estrella, it seems like we're in something of a truce. She has been respecting the boundaries we set, which is a huge relief. Unexpected visits, constant messages, and out-of-place calls no longer appear. It's a positive change, although I feel there's something fragile about this new dynamic, as if a single misstep could throw us back into chaos. Leandro and Estrella have resumed more regular communication by phone, and their conversations seem to be light and pleasant. That gives me some hope. For my part, I have also spoken with Estrella occasionally. Our chats are polite, cordial, but still a bit formal. We are both making an effort to keep the peace, and that is the most important thing for now. I feel like we've found a balance, even if it's temporary. Therefore, I have decided that this will be my last update for a while. I don't expect things to change much in the short term, and I think it's best to focus on the positive and keep moving forward. If something significant happens, I'll come back to share it with you, but for now, I want to focus on living my life. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for your words of support and advice. You have been a light in the midst of confusion, and I hope that you all also find the strength to face your own challenges. It's been longer than I expected since my last update, but today I have something important to share. After many conversations and reflections, Leandro and I finally made a decision about Estrella's check. It was a complicated process because accepting the money meant acknowledging his gesture, but also dealing with the emotional implications of doing so. In the end, we decided that cashing the check could be a step toward reconciliation. To our relief, the check had funds, which was a relief in the midst of so much uncertainty. However, the next question was, what do we do with this money? We didn't want to use it for something trivial. We felt that it had to mean something, that it had to be a way to transform this experience into something positive. After talking about it for several days, we came to a decision that excited us deeply. We would use the money to fulfill a dream we had both shared for a long time. We planned a trip to Japan, something we had always wanted to do but had never been able to afford. The trip was, in a word, transformative. We explore Tokyo with its vibrant mix of modernity and tradition, stroll through the serene temples of Kyoto, and revel in the energy of Osaka. Each experience was an opportunity to reconnect, to build new memories, and above all, to leave the weight of the past behind. As we walked under the cherry blossoms and shared dishes we had never tried before, I felt something inside me finally release. It was as if this trip had given us permission to let go of resentment and focus on what really matters: ourselves and our future together. Upon our return, we told Estrella how we had used the money. He seemed genuinely happy to hear how this gesture of his had contributed to something so meaningful to us. For the first time in a long time, his expression reflected relief rather than the tension that had dominated our recent interactions. Although there is still a long way to go, I feel this was an important step towards healing. This trip not only allowed us to reconnect as a couple, but also gave us perspective. It reminded us that, despite the challenges, we are capable of facing anything if we do it together. There is still work to do in our relationship with Estrella, but this chapter gave us confidence that the future can be brighter. By the way, we didn't bring Estrella any gifts from Japan. We decided that the greatest gift we could offer him was our effort to move forward and build something positive out of the chaos. Thank you again for joining me on this emotional journey. Your advice and support has been an invaluable guide. I hope that, like us, you find ways to overcome your challenges and move forward with strength and hope.